Kiritimati, sometimes Christmas Island, is a Pacific Ocean-raised coral atoll in the Northern Line Islands, and part of the Republic of Kiribati. The name Kiritimati is a rather straightforward respelling of the English word Christmas in the Kiribati language, in which the combination T is pronounced S, and the name is thus pronounced kəઃrɪsməs. Although most non-Kiribati people still correctly say the island's name as Christmas or Christmas Island, the change in spelling sometimes results in those not in the know to mispronounce it as the letter combination Kiritimati would be pronounced. In English, the island has the greatest land area of any coral atoll in the world, about 388 square kilometers. Its lagoon is roughly the same size. The atoll is about 150 kilometers in perimeter, while the lagoon shoreline extends for over 48 kilometers. Kiritimati comprises over 70% of the total land area of Kiribati, a country encompassing 33 Pacific atolls and islands. It lies 232 kilometers north of the equator, 2,160 kilometers south of Honolulu, and 5,360 kilometers from San Francisco. Kiritimati Island is in the world's farthest forward time zone, UTC+14, and is one of the first inhabited places on Earth to experience the New Year, despite being 2,460 kilometers east of the 180 meridian. A 1995 realignment of the international dateline by the Republic of Kiribati moved Kiritimati to west of the dateline. Nuclear tests were conducted on and around Kiribati by the United Kingdom in the late 1950s, and by the United States in 1962. During these tests, islanders were not evacuated. Subsequently, British, New Zealand, and Fijian servicemen as well as local islanders have claimed to have suffered from exposure to the radiation from these blasts. The entire island is a wildlife sanctuary. Access to 5 particularly sensitive areas is restricted. History. At Western discovery, Kiritimati was uninhabited. As on other line islands, there might have been a smaller temporary native population, most probably Polynesian traders and settlers, who would have found the island a useful replenishing station on the long voyages from the Society Islands to Hawaii, perhaps as early as AD 400. This trade route was apparently used with some regularity by about AD 1000. From 1200 onwards, Polynesian long-distance voyages became less frequent, and had there been human settlement on Kiritimati, it would have been abandoned in the early mid-2nd millennium AD. 2 possible village sites and some stone structures of these early visitors have been located. Today, most inhabitants are Micronesians, and Gilbertese is the only language of any significance. English is generally understood, but little used outside the tourism sector. Kiritimati was discovered to Europeans by the Spanish expedition of Hernando de Grijalva in 1537 that charted it as Asia. This discovery was referred by contemporary, the Portuguese Antonio Galvo, governor of Ternate, in his book Tratado dos Descubrimientos of 1563. Captain James Cook visited it on Christmas Eve 1777. It was claimed by the United States under the Guano Islands Act of 1856. Though little actual mining of guano took place, permanent settlement started by 1882, mainly by workers in coconut plantations and fishermen, but, due to an extreme drought which killed off tens of thousands of coconut palms, about 75% of Kiritimati's population of this plant, the island was once again abandoned between 1905 and 1912. Many of the toponyms in the island go back to Father Emmanuel Rougier, a French priest who leased the island from 1917 to 1939 and planted some 800,000 coconut trees there. He lived in his Paris house located at Benson Point, across the Burgle Channel from Londres at Bridges Point, where he established the port. Joe's Hill was named by Joe English, who served as plantation manager for Rougier between 1915 and 1919. English was left alone on the island for a year and a half with 2 teens, when cholera broke out in Papeete and transport stopped due to the First World War. English was later rescued by Lord John Jellicoe, 1st Earl Jellicoe, Admiral of the British fleet. English, still thinking the war was in effect and that the ship was German, pulled his revolver on the British admiral, causing a short standoff until some explanation diffused the situation. Upon his rescue, English's adventures were later chronicled in the Boston Globe. Kiritimati was occupied by the Allies in World War II. The Americans took over the island garrison, allowing Australian troops to use it for mainland defense. The first contingent of Americans was a company from the 102nd Infantry Regiment, a National Guard from New Haven, Connecticut. The island was important to hold because if the Japanese had captured it, an airbase could have been constructed that would have allowed interdiction of the main Hawaii to Australia supply route. For the first few months there were next to no recreational facilities on the island, and the men amused themselves by shooting at sharks that swam into the lagoon. The first airstrip was constructed then for servicing the U.S. Army Air Force Weather Station and Communications Center. The airstrip also provided rest and refueling facilities for planes traveling between Hawaii and the South Pacific. There was also a small radio meteorological research station operated by the Kiribati Meteorological Service. In 1975, the Captain Cook Hotel was built on the former British military base. The U.S. Guano Islands Act claim was formally ceded by the Treaty of Tarawa between the U.S. and Kiribati, signed in 1979 and ratified in 1983. The case of Spain's sovereignty rights. During the dispute over the Carolines between Germany and Spain in 1885, arbitrated by Pope Leo XIII, the sovereignty of Spain over the Caroline and Palau Islands as part of the Spanish East Indies was analyzed by a commission of cardinals and confirmed by an agreement signed on the 17th of December. Its Article 2 specifies the limits of Spanish sovereignty in South Micronesia, being formed by the equator and 11 degrees north latitude and by 133 degrees and by 164 degrees longitude. In 1899, Spain sold the Marianas, Carolinas and Palaus to Germany after its defeat in 1898 in the Spanish-American War. However, Emilio Paz de Santos, a researcher of the Spanish National Research Council, claimed in 1948 that there was historical basis, supported by the charts and maps of the time, to argue that Kiritimati and some other islands had never been considered part of the Carolines. Thus, Kiritimati was not included in the description of the territory transferred to Germany, and therefore was not affected on the part of Spain to any cessation of transfer, and theoretically Spain should have the only jurisdiction and right to this island. Pastor Santos presented his thesis to the Spanish government in 1948. In the Council of Ministers of Spain on 12 January 1949, the Minister of Foreign Affairs declared on this proposal that it has passed to the first stage of public attention. The Cabinet of Diplomatic Information of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs circulated the following note. The Minister of Foreign Affairs informed the Council of Ministers of the situation in which we find ourselves in view of information and public commentary in the press and because of the requests made of the Spanish administration. The Ministry recognized recognizes that it is a certain fact and historic truth due to Article 3 of the Treaty of 1 July 1899, that Spain reserved a series of rights in Micronesia and for another thing, the specifications of the territories which Spain ceded in 1899 leaves apart certain groups of islands in the same zone. However, no Spanish government has made any attempt in this respect, and this case remains as a historical curiosity related to Kiritimati. Nuclear bomb tests. During the Cold War there was some nuclear weapons testing in the Kiritimati area. The United Kingdom supposedly conducted its first successful hydrogen bomb test at Malden Island on 15 May 1957. Kiritimati was the operation's main base. In fact, this test did not work as planned, and the first British H-bomb was successfully detonated over the southeastern tip of Kiritimati on 8 November 1957. Subsequent test series in 1958 took place above and near Kiritimati itself. The United States conducted 22 successful nuclear detonations as part of Operation Dominica in 1962. Some toponyms come from the nuclear testing period, during which at times over 4,000 servicemen were present. By 1969, military interest in Kiritimati had ceased and the facilities were abandoned and for the most part dismantled. Some communications, transport and logistics facilities, however, were converted for civilian use, and it is due to these installations that Kiritimati came to serve as the administrative center for the line. Islands. The United Kingdom detonated some 5 megatons of TNT of nuclear payload near and 1.8 megatons of TNT directly above Kiritimati in 1957-58, while the total yield of weapons tested by the United States in the vicinity of the island between the 25th of April and the 11th of July 1962 was 24 megaton of TNT. During the British Grapple X test of 8 November 1957, which took place directly above the southeastern tip of Kiritimati, yield was stronger than expected and there was some blast damage in the settlements. Islanders were usually not evacuated during the nuclear weapons testing, and data on the environmental and public health impact of these tests remains contested. Present status. The island's population has strongly increased in recent years, from about 2,000 in 1989 to about 5,000 in the early 2000s. Kiritimati has 2 representatives in the Maniabani Mormatabu. Today there are 5 villages, 4 populated and 1 abandoned on the island. The main villages of Kiritimati are Banana, Tabwakia, and London, which are located along the main road on the northern tip of the island, and Poland, which is across the main lagoon to the south. London is the main village and port facility. Banana is near Cassidy International Airport but may be relocated closer to London to prevent contamination of its groundwater. The abandoned village of Paris is no longer listed in census reports. The Ministry of the Line and Phoenix Islands is located in London. There are also 2 new high schools on the road between Tabwakia and Banana, 1 Catholic and 1 Protestant. The University of Hawaii has a climatological research facility on Kiritimati, a Catholic church dedicated under the auspices of St. Stanislaus, and a primary school is located in Poland. Transport and commerce. Cassidy International Airport is located just north of Banana Northeast Point. It has a paved runway with a length of 6,900 feet and was for some time the only airport in Kiribati to serve the Americas, via an Air Pacific flight to Honolulu, Hawaii. American Te Maori Travel offers weekly charter flights from Honolulu, although Air Pacific hoped to commence on the 25th of May 2010 flying on a weekly schedule to Kiritimati Island from both Honolulu and Fiji. They cancelled reservations for those flights, explaining that the runway is not suitable. Rebranded Fiji Airways has resumed services from Nadi and Honolulu to Kiritimati with one Boeing 737 service per week. A monthly air freight service is flown using a chartered Boeing 727 from Honolulu operated by Asia Pacific Airlines. The abandoned Eon field, constructed before the British nuclear tests, is located on the southeastern peninsula (NW) of Southeast Point. In the early 1950s, Wernher von Braun proposed using this island as a launch site for manned spacecraft. There is a Japanese JAXA satellite tracking station. The abandoned Eon field had at one time been proposed for reuse by the Japanese for their now cancelled HOPEX space shuttle project. Kiritimati is also located fairly close to the Sea Launch satellite launching spot at 0 degrees north 154 degrees west, about 370 kilometers to the east in international waters. Most of the atoll's food supplies have to be imported. Potable water can be in short supply, especially around November in La Nina years. A large and modern jetty, handling some cargo, was built by the Japanese at London. Marine fish provide a healthy portion of the island's nutrition, although overfishing has caused a drastic decrease in the populations of large, predatory fish over the last several years. Exports of the atoll are mainly copra. The state-owned coconut plantation covers about 51 square kilometers. In addition, goods like aquarium fish and seaweed are exported. A 1970s project to commercially breed Artemia salina brine shrimp in the salt ponds was abandoned in 1978. In recent years there have been attempts to explore the viability of live crayfish and chilled fish exports and salt production. Furthermore, there is a small amount of tourism, mainly associated with anglers interested in lagoon fishing or offshore fishing. Week-long ecotourism packages during which some of the normally closed areas can be visited are also available. In recent years, surfers have discovered that there are good waves during the Northern Hemisphere's winter season, and there are interests developing to service these recreational tourists. There is some tourism-related infrastructure, such as a small hotel, rental facilities, and takeaways. Geography and climate. Kiritimati is roughly 320 square kilometers. Lagoon opens to the sea in the northwest. Burgle Channel is divided into the Northern Cook Island Passage and the Southern South Passage. The southeastern part of the lagoon is partially dried out today, essentially progressing shea from Burgle Channel. The 160 square kilometers main lagoon gradually turns into a network of subsidiary lagoons, tidal flats, partially hypersaline brine ponds and salt pans, which as a whole has about the same area again as the main lagoon. Thus, the land and lagoon areas can only be given approximately, as no firm boundary exists between the main island body and the salt flats. The Vasquez Bay is a large bay which extends along the southwest coast of Kiritimati Island. In addition to the main island, there are several smaller ones. Cook Island is part of the atoll proper but unconnected to the Kiritimati mainland. It is a sand coral island of 19 hectares, divides Burgle Channel into the northern and the southern entrance, and has a large seabird colony. Islets in the lagoon include Motu Tabu with its Pisonia forest and the shrub-covered Motu Upper at the northern side, and Gantitaki at the eastern side. Joe's Hill near Artemia Corners on the southeastern peninsula is the highest point on the atoll, at about 13 meters ASL. On the northwestern peninsula, for example, the land raises only to some 7 meters, which is still considerable for an atoll. Despite its proximity to the ITCZ, Kiritimati is located in an equatorial dry zone and rainfall is rather low except during El Niño years, 873 mm on average per year. In some years it can be as little as 177 mm, and much of the flats and ponds can dry up, such as in late 1978. On the other hand, in some exceptionally wet years, abundant downpours in March to April may result in a total annual precipitation of over 2,500 mm. Kiritimati is thus affected by regular, severe droughts. They are exacerbated by its geological structure, climatically dry. Pacific Islands are more typically located in the desert belt, at about 30 degrees north, or S latitude. Kiritimati is a raised atoll, and although it does occasionally receive plenty of precipitation, little is retained given the porous carbonatic rock, the thin soil, and the absence of dense vegetation cover on much of the island, while evaporation is constantly high. Consequently, Kiritimati is one of the rather few places close to the equator which have an effectively arid climate. The temperature is constantly between 24 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius, with more diurnal temperature variation than seasonal variation. Easterly trade winds predominate. Ecology. The flora and the fauna consist of taxa adapted to drought. Terrestrial fauna is scant. There are no truly native land mammals and only one native land bird, Kiribati's endemic reed warbler, the bokiko. The 1957 attempt to introduce the endangered Rimatara lorikeet has largely failed. A few birds seem to linger on, but the lack of abundant coconut palm forest, on which this tiny parrot depends, makes Kiritimati a suboptimal habitat for this species. Flora. The natural vegetation on Kiritimati consists mostly of low shrubland and grassland. What little woodland exists is mainly open coconut palm plantation. There are 3 small woods of catchbud trees at Southeast Point, Northwest Point, and on Motu Tabu. The latter was planted there in recent times. About 50 introduced plant species are found on Kiritimati, as most are plentiful around settlements, former military sites and roads. It seems that these only became established in the 20th century. Beech naupaka is the most common shrub on Kiritimati. Beech naupaka scrub dominates the vegetation on much of the island, either as pure stands or interspersed with tree heliotrope and baycedar. The latter species is dominant on the drier parts of the lagoon flats where it grows up to 2 meters tall. Tree heliotrope is most commonly found a short distance from the sea lagoon shore. In some places near the seashore, a low vegetation dominated by Polynesian heliotrope, yellow purslane and common purslane is found. In the south and on the sandier parts, cedar phylax, also growing up to 2 meters tall, is abundant. On the southeastern peninsula, phylax grows more stunted, and Polynesian heliotrope, yellow and common purslane, as well as the spiderling Borhavia repens, the parasitic vine Cassia filiformis, and Pacific Island thintail supplement it. The last species dominates in the coastal grasslands. The wetter parts of the lagoon shore are often covered by abundant growth of shoreline purslane. Perhaps the most destructive of the recently introduced plants is sweets and camphorweed, which is considered an invasive weed as it overgrows and displaces herbs and grasses. The introduced Creepitribulus cystoides, despite having also spread conspicuously, is considered considered to be more beneficial than harmful to the ecosystem, as it provides good nesting sites for some seabirds. More than 35 bird species have been recorded from Kiritimati. As noted above, only the bokiko, perhaps a few Rimatara lorikeets, if any, remain at all, and the occasional eastern reef egret make up the entire land bird fauna. About 1,000 adult bokiko are to be found at any date, but mainly in mixed grass, shrubland away from the settlements. On the other hand, seabirds are plentiful on Kiritimati, and make up the bulk of the breeding bird population. There are 18 species of seabirds breeding on the island, and Kiritimati is one of the most important breeding grounds anywhere in the world for several of these. Phythotiphum eastern red-tailed tropic bird, important breeding colony, 8,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline, fewer than 3,000 in 1984. Charadriaphum Micronesian black noddy, 20,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Little white tern, 8,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Central Pacific sooty tern, largest breeding colony in the world, around 7 million birds before the 1980–83 decline. Spectacled tern, important breeding colony, 6,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Central blue-gray noddy, important breeding colony, possibly the largest worldwide of this subspecies, 4,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Procellariaphum Polynesian storm petrel, important breeding colony, 1,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Phoenix petrel, largest breeding colony in the world, 24,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Christmas shearwater, largest subpopulation worldwide on Motuapua, 12,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Wedge-tailed shearwater, among the very largest breeding colonies in the world, about 1 million birds before the 1980–83 decline. Pelicaniform Indo-Pacific lesser frigate bird, important breeding colony, 9,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Central Pacific great frigate bird, important breeding colony, 12,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline, 6,500 afterwards. Austro-Pacific masked booby, important breeding colony, 3,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Indo-Pacific red-footed booby, 12,000 birds before the 1980–83 decline. Kiritimati's lagoon and the salt flats are a prime location for migratory birds to stop over or even stay all winter. The most commonly seen migrants are ruddy turnstone, Pacific golden plover, bristle-eyed curlew and wandering tattler. Other seabirds, waders and even dabbling ducks can be encountered every now and then. See also extinction below. Other fauna. The only mammals native to the region of the common Polynesian rat and the goat, but even these are tricky. Indeed, the rat would seem to have been introduced by native seafarers numerous centuries before Cook found Kiritimati in 1777, and the goat is extinct since the 14th of January 2004. Black rats were present at some time. perhaps introduced by 19th-century sailors during the nuclear tests. They have not been able to gain a foothold between predation by cats and competitive exclusion by Polynesian rats, and no black rat population is found on Kiritimati today. Up to 2,000 feral cats can in some years be found on the island. The population became established in the 19th century. Their depredation seriously harmed the bird life. Since the late 19th century, they have driven about 60% of the seabird species from the mainland completely, and during particular dry spells they will cross the mudflats and feast upon the birds on the motus. Spectacled tunchicks seem to be a favorite food of the local cat population. There are some measures being taken to ensure the cat population does not grow. That lowering the cat population by some amount would much benefit Christmas and its inhabitants is generally accepted, but the situation is too complex to simply go and eradicate them outright. See below for details. A limited population of feral pigs exists. They were once plentiful and wreaked havoc especially on the Onychoprion and Noddies. Pig hunting by locals has been encouraged, and was highly successful at limiting the pig population to a sustainable level, while providing a source of cheap protein for the islanders. There are some supertramp lizards which have reached the island by their own means, commonly seen of the mourning gecko and the skink Cryptoblepharus botai. The four-clawed gecko is less often encountered. Green turtles regularly nest in small numbers on Kiritimati. The lagoon is famous among sea anglers worldwide for its bonefish, and has been stocked with Oreochromis tilapia to decrease overfishing of marine species. Though the tilapias thrive in brackish water of the flats, they will not last long should they escape into the surrounding ocean. There are some crustaceans of note to be found on Kiritimati and in the waters immediately adjacent. The amphibious coconut crab is not as common as, for example, on Terra Ina. Ghost crabs, Cardosoma carnifex and Geographus grayi land crabs, the strawberry land hermit crab, and the introduced brine shrimp Artemia salina which populates the saline ponds are also notable.